Hello Templars, and welcome back to my office. You find me in a relaxed frame of mind because I have been brewing some beer, King & Barnes Old Ale, which is magnificent beer, and so I've had to go through a certain amount of testing. Not only that, I've been flavouring my own gin, and this is very citrusy and quite delicious, so cheers. You'll see that through the window at the back there, it is night time. It's currently 9:45 and I'm fully entitled to participate in a little bit of alcohol, I think. So, updates on this month. What have I been doing? Well, I've been writing a lot. I've written the first 62,000 words of book 5 in the Bloody Mary series. 60,000's not bad, averaging 15,000 per week was hard work. We've had some problems this week, or this last month, because I've got my problems with my hearing. I've also had a dreadful cold, but yeah, colds come around at this time of year. But a close member of the family's also had a not very nice diagnosis. Now, I'm not going to go into any details about it because I don't think he'd like me to, and it's not really what this vlog is all about, is it? But I just wanted you to know that there are these things that affect authors just the same as they affect everybody else. And I should say, this is not a plea for money. We're fully covered under the National Health Service. We don't have to worry about trying to get extra money for MRI scans or EEGs or anything else. That's all perfectly okay, so don't worry about that. Anyway, so I've been trying to write while these health issues for me and my family have been blossoming, which hasn't made it too easy, but as with all these things, you can incorporate aspects of your own life into your books, so I'll be throwing in a few details about that. It started out really quite well, this book. It started out quite strongly, quite bleak, quite black, and it took me the first week to realise that actually that was the wrong start point, because all of the Bloody Mary series tend to start off with Jack being in a rather difficult position and getting out of it somehow. So I had to change things around slightly. I had to move what was the first scene to become the 9th scene, and then the first scene became Jack, oddly enough, being in a difficult position, having to get out of it, which works quite well, I think. And then it introduces this fascinating character, the Executioner, and a number of other people as well. So all in all, it's a good start, I think. If you've read the section that I put up for vintners, then you can read through it. It's the whole of the first section of the book is in there. So what else has been happening? Well, every year in November there is a big charitable series of collections for Children in Need. Children in Need is a UK charity that helps kids in the UK and abroad. And every year in Tavistock, groups of Morris dancers gather together. I think there was 25 Morris sides this year, so that's a lot of people. And basically all they did was danced for free to try to collect money for the charity. And I believe they got close to £2,000 this year, which isn't too shabby. So that was great fun. It was all around Tavistock, which people who know my books know that I'm very fond of Tavistock. Tavistock is a lovely old town, and I think that one of its greatest citizens, presumably that's the right word, was Abbot Robert Champeau of Tavistock. Champeau was a very bright man, a really good, hard-working character. He took on the abbey. He was elected to become abbot in the late 1200s, and when he took it on they had massive debts. It was really struggling, and by the time he had left he'd built it up so that they had thousands of pounds in the bank. Very rare for someone to be able to do that. But he was a very sharp businessman and land manager. And so he did things like, for example, he offered to pay £100 a year to the king if he could take all of the rights to the customs of tin mining on Dartmoor. Most people would have looked at him and thought, you're mad. I mean, that's £100 was a huge sum of money. But he not only made it pay, he made it pay so well that after a little while he offered to pay £100 for the customs and duties at the port of Dartmouth. So he became responsible for that as well. He was a very, very shrewd man. The only sad thing is that when he died, and I assume he was in his 70s by the time he died, but when he died there was a big debate about who should take over the abbey after him. And sadly, a number of spendthrifts took on. The first was a poor devil called, I think it was Roger Bonus, who was a Frenchman who came from the south of France. And if you can imagine a poor fellow being moved from the south of France up to cold, wet, windy Dartmoor and being told, here you are, this is your new position, you're going to be abbot in charge of this place. The poor devil obviously froze to bits and eventually took to drink and had to be removed and replaced. But the abbey itself continued for quite some time until, unfortunately, Henry VIII came along and took it from the abbot, and the abbey was really dismantled completely after that. So I did some dancing, that was good. I also went along with Karen Maitland. Now Karen's a lovely lady, I've known her for some years. By sheer fluke, I met her because I'd written a review about her first book, The Company of Liars, which I highly recommend. I read that and reviewed it, and I was just stunned by how competent it was. And then I met the lovely lady at Lincoln Literary Festival, and she was there because she lived just outside Lincoln. And we got on enormously well, and so I invited her if she'd like to join me in Medieval Murderers. And she agreed, and so she was a participant in the last 5 or 6 books of Medieval Murderers. And that was enormously good fun. But while we were talking, we always cover a range of aspects of writing and so on, and I was trying to get over this blasted awful cold at the time. But we met up at Dogberry and Finch, which is a delightful new bookshop in Oakhampton. And we've seen, in the last 20 years since I moved to Devon, there were 2 bookshops in Oakhampton, both gone. There were 3 bookshops in Newton Abbot, there's 1 left. Around Plymouth there were 6 or 7 bookshops, all gone. There's a Waterstones now, a big chain. There were bookshops in Torquay, gone. Dartington, gone. Dartmouth itself I think is still there, but I'm not sure. All these bookshops, wonderful bookshops, have all disappeared. They just can't afford to survive with the competition. And so it's really nice and refreshing to see a new bookshop opening up in Oakhampton. I don't know if they're going to survive. I really hope they do, because Kate, the owner, is putting a lot of time and effort into it. And I haven't been in there yet when it's not had people in. She's got a great idea about having events every single Saturday. So let's wait and see, but I'll certainly be doing everything I can to support her. I've even given her some of my cards, because you may know I do watercolouring when I can, and there's a few that I've had made into cards, so I've given them to her to see if they sell as well. It'll be interesting to see if she can push them through the door. And so, what else can I talk about? It's a bit difficult, because when you're stuck into a book, I tend to be concentrating on that book full time. You'll notice there's no Christmas decorations here yet. Hopefully by the time the next video comes out there will be. But the only thing I can think of that I've actually done in the last month or so, apart from flavouring gin and making homebrew beer, is going to lunch in Wales, prime Wales, with Professor Bernard Knight, who is an absolutely delightful fellow. Bernard Knight was the guy who wrote the Crown of John series, amongst other books. He did quite a long series on Crown of John, which are set in the 1100s in Exeter. But he's probably rather more famous for the fact that he was the Home Office pathologist who went out and dug up all of the bodies that Fred West had dismembered and buried. I was talking to Bernard this week. He's actually writing his autobiography now, and while I was talking to him, he reckons he's probably performed autopsies on somewhere in the region of 26,000 bodies, because after he'd more or less retired as a Home Office pathologist, he then went out to various countries where there had been genocides and helped trying to identify bodies and going through the process of discovering how they'd died and so on. But he remains an ebullient, cheerful, really delightful character. He's not a grim, miserable sort of person as you might expect with that type of job. Although the first time I met him, I do remember it clearly, it was in the old brewery in London, in Chiswell Street, and we'd been talking a little bit over the phone and on the internet. And when we first met, I remember him coming towards me, and I put my hand out and we shook hands. And then as we was talking, I thought, I wonder where his hand was this morning. Ugh. But yes, that's been pretty much this month. Now, later this month, I'm going to be doing a Christmas message for patrons, because I think you deserve it, and besides I've got a bit of spare time coming up. So I hope that'll be fun. And thanks again for all your patronage, because without it life would be considerably more difficult. There's quite a long write-up about what's happening with trying to recover books from Simon & Schuster in the Pilgrims section. But I'll just say now that I'm glad to say that we've got a new publisher who is taking on the first 8 of the Templar series immediately, with a view to taking on the remainder of the 17 that Simon & Schuster had taken. They're also taking on Pilgrim's War because they can see the potential in that for a really good series about the Templars and so on. I'm looking forward to that, because the idea of Pilgrim's War was it was setting up the two brothers as antagonists, and then it was going to be the beginning of a saga based on their two families going through the 200 years of the existence of the Templars, but also of the Crusader kingdoms. So it was going to look through all of that history, great sweep of history over 5 or 6 books. I still want to do that. That is a project that's close to my heart. However, early next year, before I do that, I'm going to be writing another new book for my agent, which is going to be a police procedural, but quite a black one, set around Plymouth. And why Plymouth? Well, because it means I can incorporate the sea, smuggling, people smuggling, all of that kind of thing. I can incorporate big city problems with Plymouth. Plymouth is a very unique type of city, but it's typical of so many cities in that there's extreme poverty as well as huge wealth, all in a small enclosed area. But it's not just a city, because it's right on the border of Dartmoor. So I can incorporate really every aspect of life just by having a police officer who's based in that area. That appeals to me. I've been mapping out that book actually for quite some years. It's that one there. I know you can't see, I'm sorry, it's just out of camera. But there's a manuscript there which I wrote back in 1999, and I'm basically going to be returning to that, but relocation, rewriting it. And I think that should be good fun. It should be a good and solid story. And that is about it for now. I'm going to return to my gin. I think I'll leave the homebrew beer alone for a bit. It needs to rest for a week or two. But then it's going to be delightful, and you'll be jealous when you see me drinking it. Thanks very much for now. Thanks a lot, patrons. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your patronage. And take care. I'll see you in a bit. Cheers.